Since many of you asked for a complete video on React 19, so here we go. We will discuss all of the upcoming hooks, the API changes, and how React 19 will affect the landscape of web development drastically. By the way, if you guys want a complete React 19 project tutorial, let me know in the comments down below. So I've opened VS Code over here, and let's first of all talk about how we can install React 19. So I'll say npm create wheat at latest. It's gonna ask us the project name. I'm just gonna press dot. And package name, I'll just say React 19, doesn't really matter. And over here, you have to select React and JavaScript. Now, this has given us a new React app over here, but notice, this is React version 18. So we have to manually install React version 19 for both React and React DOM. Okay, first of all, let's just go on and install all of the dependencies over here. So I'll say npm install. All right, there we go. Now, to install React 19, we have to say npm install React at beta and React DOM at beta. Now notice, when we install this, it's gonna install the beta version of React 19 because React 19 has not been fully released yet, right? So this is the release candidate of React 19. So there we go. We have updated our dependencies. And now let's quickly go on and run this app. So I'll say npm run dev. And first of all, I'll quickly go inside the src and remove all of the things we don't need, like this assets folder, everything inside of app.css, everything inside of index.css, and inside of app.jsx, I'll remove all of these things. Everything inside of over here in the return statement, I'll have a div, which will say, subscribe to Roadside Coder, which you should if you haven't yet. Let's remove this state as well. And now if I click on it, there we go. Our app is running smoothly. Now, traditionally, how did we manage our forms in React? We had to create separate states for all of the input fields, for loading, for error, and like it was a headache, right? Let me show you. Let me give you an example right here. So something like this. So basically, we have a form over here with the username and password field. So let me show you something like this, right? So what we've done over here, we have created two separate states for username and password. And we are changing our states right over here. We have provided the value. Basically, this is a controlled input, right? And when we submit the form by pressing this button submit, it will trigger this handle submit function. And first of all, it will do, loading true, set user null, set error null. Then it will do the API call. And then in the end, it will set the error to the error and, loading to false basically, or it, in this case is pending to the false, right? So there's just so many steps. Let's just see this in action. So I'll say user and password login. You can see we have login and user has been logged in. And also, by the way, this is a dummy API that I've written over here, which simply, if the ID password is user and pass, it will return us with some dummy data, right? Just simple dummy API that I've made over here. Okay. But if it's not the user and pass, it will give us the error. So let me show you just like this. So is there a better way of writing this code? Now, before React 19 as well, we have something called form actions in React. There is actually a much better way of doing this instead of managing these username and password right over here. So let me just delete these states and I'll remove these from over here as well and from over here as well. Our code has already started to look much better. Okay, now instead of this on submit, I'll say action over here and you'll notice how easy this makes our lives, right? So if you go inside of handle submit, earlier when we used to use something called as form data, right? So what we needed to do, we needed to add inside of, let's say for our username, we needed to do name equals username. And for password, we needed to do name equals password, right? That's fine. And when we did on submit, handle submit, it would take this event and it would create like new form data and it will take out the form data from that, right? So now all of that step has been skipped, right? Notice. So instead of taking this event over here and doing e.prevent default, we can just get rid of this e.prevent default. We can directly take the form data by doing something like, so const username equals form data dot get. And inside this, we can write this username. Also same for password. So I'll say password over here. And now this will continue to work just fine. And we didn't have to, manage separate states for our inputs. Let's see, let's check it out. If I say user and pass, press enter. Yep, it works fine. if I say user and whatever login, it will say invalid credentials. Okay, and notice it has reset the input forms for us as well, right? But now we will take this one step forward by using useActionState and making our code much more efficient. Let's just get rid of all of these states, right? And I'll import useActionState from React, and we won't use useState at all right now. So let's see how this useActionState works. I'll go to Google and search useActionState. So this basically takes a callback and an initial value for our state, and it returns us with our actual state, the submit action, which was currently this function that we made over here, and an is pending as well, right? So that we don't have to manage the loading state separately. So okay, I'll say const, and I'll take my state, which we called as user, right? I'll take the submit action function, you can call it anything, and is pending, right? Now inside of the handle submit, we don't have to do is pending, set user null, set error, all of these things, and all of this stuff over here as well. I'll get rid of finally, and this set user, set error inside of this, all of these things. Okay, but we should not call this handle submit directly over here. This function will be taken by this useActionState. So okay, I'll provide this handle submit, or let's just call it login, right? I'll just provide this login to useActionState. And the second thing it took was the initial state, right? So right now I have my user state, right? So I'll say data equals null by default. So user was null by default, right? So I'll put data over here. And for managing the errors, I'll say error by null as well. So our loading is already handled, right? But we need to handle our data capturing and error handling. So we'll do that inside of this state over here. Okay. So now instead of calling this handle submit or this login function directly, we have to just call this submit action, and it will handle everything behind the scenes. So basically this useActionState will take this login function and it will provide it with two things. First is the form data, and actually form data is second thing. First is the previous state, whatever the previous state over here was, right? So how do you update this state? Whatever you will return from this function right here will result in updation of that state. So let me show you. If I am doing this, await login user with username and password, we will get the response, right? So in the console log, we will get the data. So response.data. Let me show you. If I go back, so this is giving error. So I'll just comment this error tag for now. And also this login is an arrow function, right? Let's just make it a normal function. So async function login, so that this is hosted and we can receive it over here. So yeah, like this, just a normal function. Let's see now. Okay, it's already showing us logged in because our user is object right now, right? Just ignore that for a moment. I'll just say user and password. Let's just open our console. And if I click on login, we get our response right over here. Okay, so we need to store this in the data. So I'll say return data will be response.data. And right now there's no error. So I'll say error is still null. But in the catch, I'll say return and error will be, so how are we throwing the error? Let me have a look. So inside of our API, I'll reject it with this object right over here. Inside of this object, we have this error. Okay, so I'll say error will be error dot error. And we also need the previous data as well over here, right? So what I'll do, I'll take this previous state that I showed you. We also get this over here. I'll just spread this so that we get the data and the updated error right over here. Amazing. This should work over here. Instead of user, I'll say user.data. If this exists, then I'll render user.data.email. And for error, I'll say if user.error exists, then I'll say user.error. This should do it. What's wrong? User is undefined. Let's just add a optional chaining over here. Yep, that's fine. Okay, so I'll say user and password, press enter, and there we go. We are logged in. If I press enter something else, something wrong, it will show us invalid credentials, and this should have been reset, right? So we can actually over here, we can do data equals null if you want to reset that. So it will just result in resetting. Okay. And also I've covered a lot of such complex examples like creating config driven form and things that you only learn when you're an experienced developer, and a lot of companies do tend to ask you in your interviews as well in my front-end interview preparation course. So click the link in the description down below and check out this course. This is the only thing that you will ever need to prepare for your front-end interviews. And not only this, I've covered every single topic of React.js like React Router DOM, Redux, all of the hooks, class-based component, function-based component React, even the performance optimization, which is asked from senior developers a lot, tons of machine coding questions as well, and obviously in-depth interview preparation course on JavaScript as well. So all of this you get in one single course. So click the link in the description down below, because right now we're having the biggest sale of the year for a very limited time. So don't forget to check it out. Or you can also scan this QR code on your screen to go directly to the course page. Alright, so the next hook is useFormStatus. Let's see what it does. So we've already seen this component, right? Login React 19. So we have, let's suppose, this button right over here. And if you want to create a custom component for this button, let's create. So I'll create a new file for custom btn.jsx, RAFCE. Let's say submit btn. And inside this, simply I'll have a button which will say login. And instead of this div, I'll have a button right over here. Let's just take this submit button. And instead of this, I'll have this submit button right over here. The type will be submit, like this. Okay, now you can see we have this login text right over here. Yep, that's fine if I just comment it out for now. And let's try to enter our username and password. Click on login. Right now we cannot see that logging in loading indicator, right? It's because we have not passed this is pending to this submit button right here, so that we can show this logging in indicator right here. Okay, so how do we add this inside of this component right over here without even passing it through the props? And that is where useFormStatus comes in. So if I import useFormStatus from, and we're not going to import it from React, we're going to import it from React DOM. Keep that in mind. And right here, let's just call this hook, and we will take pending from inside of it. Okay, let's just make it pending. Okay, so basically this hook checks if there's any form element in its parent tag. So if we see its parent tag is form element right over here. If this was not a form element, it would have checked even more further. If there's like nearest form tag, if it exists in the parent, it's gonna work for that particular form tag, right? So when the form is submitting, it will automatically pick up this pending value from there. And not just pending, it actually gives us more like data, method, action, all of these things. So if I just open the official React documentation, you can see this is experimental feature right now, right? And they've given this pending, data, method, and action over here. But if we go to the official React 19 release candidate documentation, they've just mentioned pending over here, right? So we're not going to consider all of these things because you never know, maybe they won't be released in React 19 when it officially releases. So for now, we will consider this pending only. And as you can see over here, useFormStatus reads the status of the parent form as if the form was the context provider, right? So this basically saves us the usage of use context. We have to, we don't have to maintain any state or anything. Even if this form right here has a deeply nested components, we can use this useFormStatus anywhere inside of this form, right? In any component inside of that particular form, and we can access this pending from over there without passing, without doing prop drilling or using context API or any sort of state management. And now if we just go back to our browser and check user and password and press enter, you can see we get this logging in and we are successfully logged in. Awesome. Now the next hook that we will be discussing is useOptimistic. So what is the use case for this? So let's suppose we have a to-do list app over here, right? And let's say whenever we add a to-do over here, like learn React, and click on add to do, it will basically make an asynchronous call and it will submit this to do and get a response from the server, right? So if I click on add to do over here, you can see it took some amount of time and then it put this learn React, the final response from the server right over here. Now what if we wanted to display a placeholder meanwhile that is happening, right? So let me just show you. So I've taken this to do component over here. right? So basically we have a form, simple form. We're using action just like we've seen in this video earlier. And it calls this handle add to do right over here with the form data. And it has this input of name to do. So it takes the to do value from over here. And then basically it simulates an API call by delaying it by 1 second, right? And then we are setting the new to do right over here. Okay. Now, meanwhile that this is happening, what people generally do is they would show a loading indicator, right, at some sort of spinner over here. But what production grade apps generally do is they would show some placeholder in place of this. Like, for example, if you use WhatsApp or some chat application, when you send the message will instantly show up over there. It's probably after a second or two that it will show that it is sent now, right? So probably meanwhile we can show the to do and we can say that we are uploading this to do to the server or something like that. So that is where the useOptimistic hook comes in the picture. So let's import useOptimistic from React. And actually I could have imported it right over here. Now this useOptimistic is very similar to useState. Let me show you. So if I say useOptimistic over here, it's going to take two things. First is the state that this is working for. So it's working for this to-dos state, right? That it will, act as a placeholder for this particular state. So I'll just say whatever is inside of to-dos, just put it over here, right? So now it will be tracking this particular state, comma, it will take a callback function over here. So let me show you. It will take the old state or the old to-dos and then the new to-do, right? That this will be displaying the placeholder for. So what we will do over here, we will take all of the old to-dos and we will add this new to-do over here. So basically we'll just take this object and paste it right here. Pending is going to be true because right now we are in the process of adding it. And this useOptimistic gives us an array just like useState with two things. One is the variable, so optimistic to do, let's say, or to-dos, and set optimistic to do. Okay, so this set optimistic to do, we're gonna send it right over here. So I'll say set optimistic to do, and I'll send it this new to do that we're getting right over here. So this will go over here, and this will display it as a placeholder over here with the pending true. So let's see how we're gonna use this. So instead of this to-dos right here, I'll say optimistic to do or to-dos, and then it will show the to-do.text. And if it's pending, it's gonna show adding right over here. Okay, let's see if this is working. Let's learn React, add to do, and you can see adding, and after the promise has been resolved, the adding is gone, and now we've gotten the final to do right over here. And honestly, this is one of my most favorite hooks in React 19 because it saves us a lot of things that we used to do earlier by using some external library, or we had to create an additional multiple different states for this. But this one thing right over here, this one optimistic to do, it's gonna handle your complete state and whatever you want to do with it in that particular time frame. Alright, now let's discuss probably one of the most awaited change in React 19, which is called use. Yeah, that's it. That's what it's called, use. I don't understand the React team's obsession with the keyword use, but let's see. So this use thing is actually, ironically, not a hook. It is a completely different thing. It's actually an API change in the React. So let's see. When we had to fetch some data earlier in React.js or React 18 and before, we used to do something like this. So let's say we have this API, JSON placeholder, of posts API. We have created a use state over here. We're doing fetch dot then response.json dot then. We're setting this state right over here. We're setting the loading state over here, right? Simple enough. And now in the bottom, we are rendering all of the posts over here. If we see, yep, everything's working fine. But this use in React 19 will change the way we fetch data. So let's import it. I'll say use, and I'll comment out this use effect and both of these states right over here. Okay. So I've written use over here. So this use is basically going to take a promise inside this parenthesis. So let me just create a promise. So I'll say const fetch posts, and I'll just take this fetch equals fetch, and I'll do dot then. So I'll just take this dot then response.json, right? That's all. This is just fetching this API and returning a promise inside this fetch posts. We will still need to do this dot then, right? If we want to take this data out, but we're not going to do that over here. Instead, we're going to take this fetch posts, provide it to this use over here. And now we can do const posts, and this will handle everything right out of the box. So let's see what it does. But before this actually needs one more thing. We would need to add a suspense over here. So suspense as a fallback, right? Meanwhile, this is fetching this API. It would need to display something. So you can add this suspense probably somewhere else as well. But I'll just say fallback equals loading. And let's go back and see. There we go. We can see all of our posts right over here. If we just refresh this, you can see we have the loading and we can see the data right here. But if we right click and click on inspect in the console, we're going to see this error. A component was suspended by an uncached promise. Creating promises inside of a client component or a hook is not yet supported. So what basically is going to happen is every time this component re-renders, it's going to create a new promise. So if the data is already loaded, we would need to cache this data somehow, right? Like for example, we do this in libraries like React Query, which support, caching of promises. So obviously this feature right here, it's not ready for production. And if we see in the documentation as well, you can see this use API. They have mentioned this in the documentation that you will get this error. And to fix this, the caching of promises, the React team is still working on this, and they will ship a new feature to make it easier to cache the promise by the time the final React 19 version releases. So that's the reason this is an experimental feature, right? You can definitely go and read more about it from the documentation. They have added much more details about this over here. Now the next change is something that has been a very big headache for React developers for a very long time. So let me show you. Let's say we have this container over here, right? With this custom input component, let's just forget it for now. But we have these buttons, focus and clear, right? Whenever we click on focus, it should focus on this input. Whenever we click on clear, it should clear this input, right? Let me just show you first. So there we go. If I say hello over here, I'm not currently focusing on this. If I click on focus, it will focus on it. It's because we have added a ref over here. And whenever we click on handle focus, it will just focus that element. Whenever we click on clear, it will just do input ref.current.clear, right? Simple enough. But this is a custom input component. And if we go inside of it, we have the actual input right over here, the actual input tag. So we have to get the reference of this particular input tag, right? So what would we do up until now? So we have this useRef or the ref created in the parent component. And if we want to pass this ref to the child component, we have to use something called forward ref over here. And only then we will be able to pass a ref. If you don't use this forward ref, you won't be able to do it at all, right? And then I'm using this use imperative handle hook to call this focus and clear functions right over here. So we can call them over here, right? So the actual logic for this focus and clear is written right over here. And I've actually covered this use imperative handle hook, which not a lot of people know about, but it's a very important interview question in my front-end interview preparation course. So yeah, click the link in the description down below if you want to check out that course. So now with React 19, we would no longer be needing to use this forward ref. So we can just get rid of it. And now we can simply pass refs as a prop. So currently, let's just, destructure this. Let's take the props and I'll write the ref over here. That's more like it. Let's get rid of this forward ref. And there we go. Everything works the same. Let's just go over here. If I enter something, focus, clear. Yep, everything is working fine. Amazing. So these were the major features of React 19, right? The major changes that is coming onto the React 19. And if you scroll down, you can see, we can see this ref as a prop change. And there's one change over here, which is this support for document metadata. So earlier we would need to use some library like React Helmet, like they've mentioned it over here as well, by libraries like React Helmet to set the metadata for our apps, right? Now we can do it directly by using this meta tag, link tag, and meta tag over here. So definitely I would highly recommend you guys to go and check out this documentation for React 19. I would give the link for this in the description down below as well. We have some more minor changes like support for style sheets and some changes in use deferred value, which are not that much of a high priority stuff. And if you want me to create a complete project using React 19, definitely let me know in the comments down below so that you can know that whatever that we have discussed in this video, I'll show you where we can actually use them in our production apps.